Tuesday, July the 11th, 2023. Good morning. How are you doing today, my dear friend? I hope you're doing well. I hope you're happy and healthy. Today I'm covering chapters 12, 13, and 14 in the book Discovering the Universe by Freeman Dyson, the best book that I've read in several years. Chapter 12 is called Peacemaking. There's a paragraph in here that hints that he may have had a ghostwriter because it's so, superlative that I have a hard time seeing a scientist could write that. On page 128, he talks about experiencing silence, right? He gave this report where he was trying to argue for non-proliferation of weapons, and most of the chapter is about his work in developing weapons and pushing for their safe use, only defensive use, and so on and so forth. And so he does a paragraph here where he talks about, he says, only once in my life have I experienced absolute silence. That was flat under the midday sun. Long ago I read in Herbert Ponting's The Great White South of the silence of a windless day in Antarctica. This was as silent as Antarctica. It was a soul-shattering silence. You hold your breath and hear absolutely nothing. No rustling of leaves in the wind, no rumbling of distant traffic, no chatter of birds or insects or children. You are alone with God in that silence. There, in the white flat silence, I began for the first time to feel There, in that white flat silence, I began for the first time to feel a slight sense of shame for what we were proposing to do. Did we really intend to invade this silence with our trucks and bulldozers, and after a few years leave it a radioactive junkyard? The first shadow of doubt about the rightness of this project came into my mind with that silence. So he's describing this silence, and he's comparing it to this, the silence of Antarctica that was described in this gentleman's book, The Great White South. Now, mind you, this guy is at a polymath level, a superlative level of intellectual accomplishment that is beyond 99.9% of the population. You hear about him growing up, feeding on advanced mathematics and classical music and literature and languages, that are beyond most people's capability. So for him to be able to write at that level and describing the silence, he was describing the silence of when he submitted his report, his recommendations for military applications, and he got the cold treatment. His recommendations were not responded to, and so he's describing the silence of it. And but if he has that capability, all the better. And it really doesn't matter because the book itself is fantastic to read, and it gets a hold of you. Now, later on, he does mention that he was friends with a writer for the New Yorker. And I'm thinking to myself, hey, wait a minute, put two and two together here. Maybe he got someone to help him write like that. But it's probably my own jealous speculation that I'm mentioning that. I shouldn't really even bring that up to you, but I thought I would mention it because it's just so well written. And here, he's also very humble in this chapter on peacemaking. On page 129, he says, in retrospect, it's easy to see that my argument was wrong on at least 4 counts. Wrong technically, wrong militarily, wrong politically, and wrong morally. And he's talking about his recommendations while building nuclear-based weapon systems and so on. And a couple other quotes I'm going to leave out here just for the sake of brevity. Chapter 12 on peacemaking, all about his work with the ACDA, it's called. It's the, I forget the acronym, I'll mention it for you, but it's an organization dealing with disarmament, right? He's basically a spook. He was working for the government. He would have the highest level of clearance, and he would make recommendations about their relationship to Russia and whether they should disarm or whether they should produce only defensive-based weapons, not offensive-based weapons, and so on. Pardon me. Oh, just getting a little Java to get me going today. And that's chapter 12. Extremely well written. The paragraphs are perfectly spaced. The chapters are a perfect size, so you can sit down and absorb a complete chapter. The actual structure of the book itself is superlative. So, let alone the content, it's just a pleasure to read. A pleasure to read. This goes on the top shelf. This is front and center. This is the best book that I've read in the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. The last 20 books. This one is head and shoulders above. Chapter 13, the ethics of defense. An amazing discussion and essay on ethics and defense from somebody that is involved at the highest level of producing, weapons of mass destruction, if you want to call it that. And he says here on page 151, either we establish some kind of world government with a monopoly of military power, or we achieve a stable division of the world into independent sovereign states, with the armed force of each state strictly confined to the mission of defending its own territory. On humanistic and cultural, as well as political grounds, I vastly prefer the second alternative. Fortunately, the majority of people seem to share my preference. From the beginnings of human history until today, great empires have tended to disintegrate, and world government movements have failed to attract wide public support. If we consider world government either undesirable or unattainable, then the aim of our military and diplomatic efforts should be not to abolish nationalism, but to guide the forces of nationalism into truly defensive channels. We should strive to build a peaceful and harmonious society of independent nations in which each country maintains a citizen army, as Switzerland does now, posing no threat to its neighbors, but ready to fight like hell against anybody who comes with dreams of conquest. Boom! Page 151, right there, right? Compare that with the absolute refuse and excrement that was produced by John Ralston Saul, repeating over and over again, oh, nationalism's bad, in his book, The Collapse of Globalism. What a horrible communicator, what a insincere, deceptive, duplicitous writer that John Ralston Saul is, compared to this gentleman who is so straightforward, God rest his soul, and direct and lucid and accurate and straight to the point, right? Let me just read that one or two sentences again. He says, either we establish some kind of world government. See, this is where the initial idea of world government came from, was when they developed the atomic bomb. They said the only way we can keep the world safe is if we have one world government. And then they just ran with it. And it kept getting repeated over and over and over again. It's still repeated today. It didn't work. It never worked. When you have a one world government, you got disasters that happen. But let me leave that aside for now. Let's just leave his opinion, okay? He says, either we establish some kind of world government with a monopoly of military power, or we achieve a stable division of the world into independent sovereign states, with the armed force of each state strictly confined to the mission of defending its own territory. On a humanistic and cultural as well as political grounds, I vastly prefer the second alternative. I agree with this guy, one of the smartest men to ever walk the face of the earth in the last 100 years. And the most talented, this is his opinion. And I agree with him wholeheartedly, because it's a sensible opinion based on the knowledge of somebody who is extremely intelligent, extremely talented, and extremely aware at the highest levels of the dangers posed by proliferation of military devices, in particular atomic and nuclear devices. Let's move on to chapter 14, the murder of Dover Sharp. This is a bizarre situation that happened when he was at Princeton, and they riled up the students saying that, these guys were working on warmongering stuff that could be used in Vietnam. They were worried they might use nuclear weapons in Vietnam, and so the students somehow riled up. They never been able to prove who did it, but somebody ended up building a bomb, putting it in a cardboard box, a half gallon of gasoline attached to a pipe bomb and a timer, and the guy put it into this box, and he delivered it to their office, the office where the scientists were working. A horrible thing that they did. Of course it's a horrible thing. and they delivered it to their office. And the custodian, the guy who was essentially the janitor or took care of the apartment where they were staying at the university, he went down and received the package, opened the package, and it unfortunately, you know, it went off and damaged him to the point where he passed away a couple of days later, even though at the time he was talking and he was conscious and telling them, oh, it's not so bad, and blah, blah, blah. Well, they took him to the hospital, and because the burns were so extensive, the poor gentleman by the name of Dover Sharp passed away, several days later. And he just talks about, the horror and the shame and the guilt from this unfortunate circumstance. And he also talks about the existing discussions that were going on at that time and beyond that time, dealing with scientists from all over the world trying to cooperate. And again, extremely well written, sad, but he's talking from his actual life experience, right? So that's chapter 14. How am I doing for time? I want to keep these short, so God bless you. I really appreciate you watching, but I'm just, this is like dining out at the most expensive restaurant you could ever go to, because it is fine dining for the soul, and it's really going to stick with me. This is the type of book that I would like to pick up and read at least maybe once a year, or at least go over it as best I can, or go over my notes on it at least every once in a while, because it is so powerful and insightful. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're able to get your hands on some good books. If you do happen to get your hands on this particular book, I bet you'll enjoy reading it. And it's a shame that more political leaders in our country today aren't familiar with this book, because it would wake up a lot of people on a lot of different topics concerning ethics, military ethics, global political cooperation, right? The striving towards righteousness and truth in human relationships, both on a personal level and a community, country, global level, right? How do we get along without killing each other? This is the theme of the book, is striving towards mutual cooperation so we can advance as a civilization. Just a very remarkable, and I wish our current leaders, especially in Canada, would read this book and take it to heart. So God bless you so much. I love you. I really appreciate you watching. Thank you for your support, and I hope that we can talk again soon in the near future. Have a great day. Enjoy the beautiful weather. They were forecasting rain this week, but it's sunshiny again, so praise God for that. We'll talk to you soon, okay? Take care. Have a good day. Bye-bye now.